Good day, everyone, and thank you for joining International Bipolar Foundation's webinar today. Today we have Max and Kathy. Max has been living with bipolar for 16 years. He and his mother, Kathy, will dispute 3 harmful myths that can interfere with recovery. They will share that full recovery is possible, that individuals are in control of their recovery, and that speak openly about one's illness is a risk worth taking. A diagnosis of bipolar disorder does not mean that your life is out of your hands, say Kathy and Max. Listen in for their strategies to navigate healthcare while creating space for personal choices. Kathy is currently a writer and speaker, and Max is an artist, part-time teacher, and speaks for NAMI. Kathy and Max are also the authors of Walks on the Margins, a story of bipolar illness. Their book aims to put a face on mental illness and tells of their struggle and recovery after Max was diagnosed with bipolar in 1999. Welcome, Kathy and Max. It's great to have you guys both here today.
Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate your asking us to speak today. This is such a great organization, and we really encourage people to support your programs with donations. All the programs are free, and it's just such a wonderful resource.
Yes, and such a slew of webinars on there, free for the watching, and so it's just nice to have such a exhaustive resource here developing. So thank you for having us. Hello.
Yeah, next slide.
Thank you both. Yes, thank you very much. Go ahead and proceed. Thank you.
Okay, let's get started.
Max and I are in 2 different locations. He's in Chicago, and I'm in Colorado, so he's operating the slides and trying to coordinate with what I'm going to be saying, what I'm going to start the discussion. So if we could switch to the collage slide.
Okay, sorry, just kidding. Here we go.
I want to start by telling you a little bit about Max and our story. Max is the youngest of 4 kids. He and his sister Jessie and 2 older step-siblings. You can see the family picture there on the upper right. That's Max standing at the end with a stick in his hand, a walking stick. Max, as he was growing up, seemed fine. His grades were good. He pitched for Little League. He practiced viola. He got tall and he learned to drive. He went to proms and he graduated from the International Baccalaureate program at his high school. Then he went to college in Iowa. In 1999, he was a junior at Grinnell College. On September 9th of that year at 5 a.m., I was sound asleep when the phone rang. It was Max. "Mom," he said, "turn on the TV. Watch the news." I stumbled down the stairs, not knowing what on earth was happening. And I clicked on the TV. And I didn't see what Max saw. I called him back, and he said, "Mom, you just don't understand." He walked out of the door of his apartment that day, and he began a journey that has lasted until this very day. By that afternoon, he was in the hospital and immediately diagnosed with bipolar 1. He was hospitalized every year after that. He was manic, psychotic, depressed, suicidal. He's been in crisis centers, emergency rooms, and psychiatric hospitals from Colorado to Philadelphia and places in between. He's been restrained, isolated, abused in places I felt were safe. It felt like such a betrayal. But along the way, we learned how to manage illness. and to get past some of the preconceived notions or myths that we encountered in our battle. Myth 1, you will never get better. Having bipolar disorder was too often characterized as hopeless. Doctors, other professionals, even peers painted a grim picture. Some things were not overt, but implied. Some things were actually stated right out front. Max would be defined by his illness. He would never finish college, never have a career, never have a significant relationship. Once, I don't know, maybe we were into the illness probably 3-4 years, and Max had been in and out of the hospital for three months. His doctor called me and said, Max is never going to get better. He's never going to be able to take care of himself. He will be a victim of his illness. He said I needed to start planning for a future of dependence. You better, he said, you better find a boarding home. You better prepare financially. You better, you better, you better. It was a prognosis that I simply could not accept. And I realized that some providers have also found errors in these assumptions. Says Dr. Stephen Martyr, it's just embarrassing. For years, we as psychiatrists have been telling people with a diagnosis what to expect. We've been telling them who they are, how to change their lives, and it was just bad information for many people. I became my own authority. I figured out what we could do, what we could expect from the mental health system. I figured out how to make demands, who to trust, what to believe about treatment. It was trial and error over many, many years. But finally, with Max's help, really, I realized what he needed. He needed to be trusted, and he needed to be listened to. He needed his experiences to be validated. Too often, people told Max that what he had experienced didn't matter. It had no meaning, no value. But I believe Max has known a world that so many of us have not known and will never know. His experiences have been unique and profound for him. And he needed to be able to talk through his experiences. He found one therapist in particular who was willing to do that with him. And that therapist, he stayed with that therapist for several years. Max needs his feelings about medication to be respected. He, over the years, learned what medications he just could not take. The side effects were too horrible, and there were other medications that easily could serve the same purpose. Max needed to be listened to. He needed his doctors to listen to him about what medications he simply felt okay about taking and which ones he didn't. And Max has found medications that do work for him and that he does take on a regular basis. He doesn't discount medication. He just discounts some medication that just does not agree with him. Max also needed to live on his own. It was important for him to have his own place, and certainly he was never going to live in a boarding home. It was just not something he could live with. And he didn't want to live at home. I don't blame him. And so we were able to help him do that. And now he continues to have his own apartment in Chicago with his wife, Maria. We also realized that Max needed to push his boundaries. He was not going to accept the fact that he couldn't continue on with his life. He wanted to return to school. He did return to school after that first episode. It took him 5 years to graduate, but he did graduate. He got his BA, and then he decided to go on and get his master's in fine arts. And he has since taught art and is mastering his art. Not only did I figure out what Max needed, I also figured out what I needed. I had to be supported. I needed to be able to find people who understood what mental illness was all about, and I found that support system chiefly through NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I took their family-to-family class, which for those of you who don't know is a free 12-week class for family members. It's taught by other family members who are trained. And the minute I walked into that class the first night, I felt that I was where I needed to be. I realized that everyone in that room had been through the very same things that I had been through, and I could speak openly without fear of judgment. I also understood that I had to get educated, and I did get educated, of course, through reading, but also through a lot of experience in talking with other people. Lastly, I had to get involved. I was angry for the first few years because it was so difficult finding good treatment for Max, and I needed to direct that anger. So I got heavily involved with NAMI. I began teaching classes. I ran programs. I joined the board of directors, and I was eventually the president of the local Colorado Springs organization. I just believe strongly in advocating for those we love and for everyone who has mental illness in their families. It's just got to be done because there are so many flaws in the system. So I just want to conclude my little portion here by saying that we can help those we love, and we can help those who are our patients build successful lives. We ourselves, I think, need to believe in recovery. We need to partner in treatment rather than dictate. We need to include families in treatment. We need to allow those who are in treatment, who have an illness, to have input into how their treatment progresses, what their treatment plans are. We need to offer hope. We need to see the full potential of those we love. And we need to support their personal journeys, whatever those may be, and encourage them to go for it.
Okay. Myth 2. You are not in control. Very ominous. I'm going to approach this myth. Introducing Sergei Konstantinovich Punkachev. Sergei was a Russian, obviously, who, by some accounts, was the most important case study in Freudian theory. He sought treatment in the early 20th century for depression and neurosis with Dr. Freud. And eventually Freud gave Sergei the pseudonym Wolfman. So if you hear me say Wolfman, this is Wolfman. Speaking of myths, he was not a werewolf. For his dream of a pack of white wolves collecting outside his window, he was given the pseudonym Wolfman. He's going to represent me, though, in a short story of my treatment in the psych office. This is what I'd like to sort of present as the dominant paradigm for the administration of medicine through psychiatry. And in this paradigm, or sort of myth, the expert uses a set of knowns to define treatment, and the patient takes the treatment and recovers, assumedly. Most of you already know this paradigm to be an illusion if you've even brushed against psychiatry. But here is Wolfman, both disempowered and passive, and in the medical model, Sergi does what Freud says. This is what I'd like to present as a little bit more accurate paradigm, a little slightly different. Anyway, when there isn't forced medicine, the patient goes from passive to active in this model, and essentially kind of gets his authority through a sort of veto power. The reason he has that power is because the hit and miss approach of psychiatry leads to a dynamic of doubt between the doctor and the patient, because facts are always vulnerable in psychiatry. There is an exchange of professional and lay opinions in the psych office, and that exchange determines treatment. Opinions are exchanged about effects, dangers, efficacy, manufacture, any number of characteristics of the drugs offered, and the great variety that they are. Vanity may inevitably come to bear here, where willingness on the part of the patient is crucial, but never guaranteed. So here is the Wolfman. The first suggestion that I got for medicine was lithium. This is up in the corner there. You'll see the compound lithium. You have to remember that when someone usually seeks treatment for the first time, when the Wolfman came to Freud, he was in dire straits. His sister had committed suicide. His father committed suicide. He was out to save his life. He was depressed and, quote, neurotic. So just as me, I was coming from a place of crisis and catastrophe. This was my first episode. I still had residual symptoms of mania. I was heartbroken. I was exhausted and confused. And there I was in a psych office making lifelong decisions with little or no information or experience. Basically, based on what I had learned in the time between my diagnosis with bipolar and my first outpatient psychiatrist appointment, I created this picture of lithium. These were my greatest concerns and what created the lithium veto. Hand tremors. At this point, it was increasingly feeling like my drawings were sort of all I had. And maybe it's the look of the thing or the name. This mysterious metal. Could it be kryptonite? Would I ever fly again? Is this the end of Wolfman? This idea is unfounded, and this idea had an effect on my long-term treatment, and had effect on the next 6 years of my life. Had a deep effect, along with a total fear of blood, what they call hemophobia. I'm deathly afraid of blood and do not like needles at all. I'm on the verge of unconsciousness at the sight of blood, and the old way. I associated it with an expired sort of treatment, that we ought to get the better of. Horrific pictures of the old asylum as seen on TV, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I'm sure they had lithium then, lobotomies, straps, and the ever unelected for ECT. That's what I sort of associated lithium with. So I wouldn't even try it. This was a world ruled by myth, and here for the first time I added my 2 cents to the mix. So. The second suggestion, after I vetoed that one, was valproic acid, otherwise known as Depakote, with a little something, as my doctor said, called ziprasidone or Geodon, atypical antipsychotic. I like to think of this one as cake and eating cake, the known and the new coming together. Depakote's relatively tested. It's not as old as lithium in the FDA's eyes, and you know, it has a certain knownness about it. It's sort of been used for epilepsy since the 70s, so early 70s. And ziprasidone, new, futuristic, Geodon, I don't know, it was sort of, it was sort of the untestedness of that drug that attracted me, that it might be sort of the miracle drug, you know, that they hadn't found yet, and that I was going to be, you know, one of these first people to finally, you know, overcome their disorder. So, you know, I got to have my cake and eat it too. I got something tested, and I got something new. I got something, you know, with promise of the new and the promise of the tested together, creating, you know, a kind of mix where all my ills are cured with a kick and a punch, and all my powers are restored, and who knows, you know, even made greater. So, over time, though, because it didn't seem to work, or it didn't stick, and I wasn't quite, you know, in fairness to these medicines, committed or accepting of my illness. So, on the other hand, 6 years of lots of different, just a few other compounds that I tried, really not knowing what they were. And so I think there was a change in me that was, you know, caused by this experience with medicine, and it was just a change in me that was probably instilled with my illness and, you know, institutionalization. All these things started to change my mind about how I saw medicine. So this is sort of where things got, you know, more extreme. This was a bumpy ride for 6 years, and I started to look at the industry sideways, you know, until, you know, I was really completely entangled with it. I was embattled with it. I was set in opposition, and there was really no keeping me on anything. Because if this picture is associated with your medicine, how can you be expected to take it the rest of your life? So a change has to happen here, and I think in some ways, you know, lithium was the answer for me, because call it a loss of faith, but 2000 to 2006, I had 8 hospitalizations on a cocktail of drugs. So lithium was suggested again. This was about 2006, after about 7 years of having been diagnosed. So here you see quite a different picture of lithium. You know, I had time to absorb information, you know, pick up on this picture of lithium over time, and it was it was complicated by my experience, with institutionalization, but it really wasn't the science or statistics or anything, but it was really my impressions of lithium, personal impressions, that were decisive in it becoming my maintenance drug. It's a naturally occurring light metal. It was invented at the Big Bang. It's entrenched in this long history, and it's widely manipulated by any number of different, batteries and etc., different forms of it. It was used to treat mania as early as 1870 by William Alexander Hammond, and so it has the longest history of any medicine I know of, and so it became sort of weighted with this this idea that people had ingested this and lived the rest of their lives. That was important for me. But really, pop culture weighs really heavily in here because you have your lithium mineral water, which is produced, your lithium 7-Up, which had a short stint in the Uncola's history. And even to this day, on the right, you see Lithia beer. Can't recommend it, never tried it, wouldn't probably try it, but the Lithium Springs, Lithium Springs vacations happen every day, all over the world, everywhere. It's an attraction, flirting sometimes with the myth of the Fountain of Youth. You see, let's see, also Kay Redfield Jamieson, who not only is a proponent of lithium, but a doctor who has taken lithium for a long time, adamantly recommending it to people. And Nirvana is up there. I don't know. These are all playing into my picture here, and fact and fiction are blurred here, and what's important and what's not important is also hard to get a hold on. But the bottom line, I think, was not just lithium's effectiveness for me, which I realized over time, but when I started, I didn't know it was effective, and these kind of images bore witness to a popular faith in lithium, which really brought me back into the fold of medicine, because it was something that, as little as pop culture may know about facts, where it puts its faith, has the greatest effect on a person's willingness to be involved. So I want to say that, and let's see here. Oops, slides are slow. So 2007 to 2014, I had 2 hospitalizations. I'm not here recommending lithium. What I'm saying here is that these are the factors that determined what drug I was on. And I had to go from a place of disempowerment where I couldn't understand the science, and I'm not sure anybody can, to a place of empowerment through taking the sort of mythology in popular culture and using it to understand a medication. So I just want to bring that into play here, because I think frequently the myth is that science is in control, and that there's a certain raw fact that can be pulled out of someone's pocket, and in fact, this is the kind of thing that determines treatment, and it's something that's often, I think, overlooked. Here, the Wolfman is empowered. He's empowered because he's in touch with these impressions. He's at the center of these impressions. And finally, that veto power in the psych office gives him the final say. So here, though, is something else that was happening around that cusp of where I would say I went from very sick to recovering. And so around 2005, 2006, I did these paintings. They're large paintings, and you know, so things were happening in my life. I was finishing graduate school. This was my thesis exhibition, and painting had really taken hold of me. It had started to mean something more than I sort of ever thought it was going to mean. And so beyond that, these paintings were sort of a rehashing of psychotic breaks, you know, where I was really trying to tap into an emotion analogous to my extreme moods, and really trying to do that by reliving and filling out the memories of my psychotic breaks. So this would have been my sort of first retelling of my story, and sort of mapping these memories in different ways, and you know, conflating them and remapping them. And this made it possible. This is Lasertown, a fledgling art collective in North Philly where I was involved. And so you see on the left there, what that place made possible was this, was a kind of new scale to what I was doing. And so I was suddenly sort of up against a world that was really bigger even than the world of my illness. And you know, it gave me a chance to make, you know, giant trampolines, and it was really fun, I guess. And you know, it was fun, but you know, to make a 16-foot painting, there's some planning involved, and you actually have to make the canvas. I stretched this canvas, so there's a control that had to be exercised over the whole process. There was no paintings without my being in possession of myself, and I had just started to get that possession, I think, at this point. So there was kind of a directedness about achieving these paintings, a control. So where there's this world of, you know, everything's out of control, and that's what I'm actually interested in, there's also this other world of planning and execution and you know, making something happen in reality. And I think that's part of what makes painting so wonderful, is that it's so physical, and it's the real, and you wake up tomorrow and the painting is still there. And you wake up 10 years from now, it's still there. So there's a sense of, you know, that of permanency, and kind of a way in which painting is like so much stronger than the illness. You know? So yeah, it was fun, and it was redemptive, and it was, I think, you know, it had me believing that, you know, there was something here to live for. This is a detail of the painting, and you can kind of just see I really was emotional about this. I'm a little embarrassed in some way, but this is what happened when I let myself loose, and I kind of created the conditions, the frame for letting myself loose again. And I think by the end, not understanding anything more except that art was where I wanted to be, and that was control for me, I think, at the end. Okay. 3.
Myth 3. You should stay silent. The assumption is that you should remain in the shadows, but says author and speaker Ian Van Zandt, it's important that we share our experiences with other people. Your story will heal you, and your story will heal someone else. When you tell your story, you free yourself and give other people permission to acknowledge their own story. Yes, there are huge risks. You risk rejection from your peers, even your family, possibly your employers. And people are uncomfortable about hearing about mental illness. They don't know how to respond. Some are just plain afraid of what they don't understand. There's judgment. People with mental illness, they think, wow, they're just plain crazy. You know, there's so much discrimination. And so coming out and speaking about your illness can be pretty scary. So each of us need to make our own judgment based on what we think the repercussions might be. Although often there are venues where you can remain anonymous. But I worried about the risks when Max and I began writing our book. When we were ready to publish Walks on the Margins, I got really scared for Max. We'd be bringing his illness out into the light for the whole world to see. We knew what that could mean. He'd be defined by his illness, possibly. Perhaps he'd be discriminated against in the workplace. Certainly there could be judgment. So it was really up to Max whether he wanted to go forward or not. And he said, yeah, we just need to do it. So we did. And Walks on the Margins was published a year and a half ago. In it, we alternate chapters. It's a joint and separate journey through our illness. Max writes from the inside of illness. He really puts people in his shoes. People can really feel what it's like to be manic or depressed. I write from the outside, trying to find him help and keep him alive. The process was painful, to say the least. We were reliving some really difficult times. Sometimes we were working separately. Sometimes we were working together. Collaboration was hard. But I think Max would say, I know Max would say, and I certainly would say that I'm really glad we did it. I'm pleased to report that more good things happened than bad things. In fact, there were few bad things that ever did happen. So we want to talk a little bit about why we decided to write this book and what the benefits were. First of all, it allowed us to live authentically, to be genuine. We no longer were smothered by the burden of silence. We're free to speak openly and honestly about our journey through illness. We talk about the terrible things that happened, and we talk about coming out the other side. What I didn't realize was how tremendously healing writing the book would be. And every time we speak, it's just been so rewarding to speak. We take every opportunity we can to speak out. Max and I have done some radio and TV. We go to conferences and speak. Of course, there are book signings, and here we are this morning, once again talking about illness.
So it also allowed us to reach understanding. I'd qualify that by saying, I'm pretty sure I'll never understand this illness. But that didn't mean it wasn't important to portray it and remember it, and to reach understanding with my family and friends above all, and those who were there with me during my episodes and helped me through them, and of course strangers, and reaching a sort of inherent almost understanding with people that I meet for the first time. I just wanted to say something true about an illness which really drowns in falsity, even if it doesn't at the end sort of make an understandable picture of it.
It helped us also to break down some of the barriers of stigma, or we'd like to think it does, because there's so many prejudices, misperceptions, and through the story we could correct those misperceptions and show that people with mental illness aren't bad, they aren't misguided. In fact, people with illnesses need to be a whole lot stronger than most people. So we show people what it's like to walk in our shoes. We want people to understand Max and others and the battles we fight. And we wanted to show the courage it takes to keep going. I think the more people that hear these stories, the more they accept these illnesses.
Yeah, and so in that, it brings us, it has brought us in contact with our peers, and as a forum through which to talk honestly about illness and a place to begin a conversation. It's a way to sort of talk in third person a little bit, and it's a way to say something about, a place between the illness and the speaker to it kind of buffers you a little bit, that you can talk about a piece of writing, or you can say something in a public forum in a way, and feel more free to talk and say something about a piece of creativity, instead of necessarily addressing the difficulty of and the awkwardness of talking about illness itself. It is about illness itself, of course, but by having a subject, and something that can be sort of agreed with or not, it sort of makes all the difference. And in some way, it sort of scares the rabbit out of the hole. So you kind of, I found out my neighbor was bipolar just about a week ago when I gave her our book. So, it's just surprising, but they are your neighbors, and it's funny that we don't know that, but.
It also helped us encourage others. We wanted those with bipolar and their families to know that others have felt what you have felt, experienced what you have felt, and that you're not the only ones that have ever had these experiences, that people do get through it. I think the important message is that you are not alone.
Finally, engage us in the creative process, which I'm always down for. I need, I don't want to mention the word catharsis, but there I did. This was importantly a collaborative creative process, though. So part of the lesson was compromise and reaching agreement, and really, in a collaboration where the greatest challenges in writing loom large. So, okay.
We encourage you to tell your stories if you're comfortable with it, and this is a list of places you can do it. There are all sorts of places you can do that, and you can do it anonymously. Max is going to do a reading, and maybe we'll end with that reading, and hopefully we'll have time for Q&A.
I wonder if we should skip the reading. Should we?
Okay. Okay, you want to go straight to questions and answers?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that.
You know what, how about if you go ahead and read for us, and that will allow people time to type in their questions?
Sure.
Okay, great. Thank you.
This is from the last part of the book, and there's a number of different voices of my own that sort of I've developed in this book, but this is sort of writing from a place of recovery, so it won't be hard to understand, as some of it is. This is about my last therapy appointment at the University of Pennsylvania, where I was having cognitive therapy, and they have a 2-year program there, or 1 to 2 years, where you sort of graduate in it, and you're not supposed to kind of come back after that, which is weird, but this was my last day. It was sort of my graduation day. This is from the chapter called Real Music. The deep rock bottle lets off its familiar bellow through the waiting room of the University of Pennsylvania Behavioral Health offices as I pick up a highlights magazine and take my customary seat by one of those stringy plants that need absolutely no sunlight to survive. I try to seem involved in my reading material and mind my own business, but I can't keep my eyes from wandering, from guessing why everyone is here. How hard a 28-year-old such as me stares at a kid's magazine might be the only hint that something is off kilter. Most of those who make their appointments are the invisibly afflicted. We could be standing behind you in the grocery line, spying on your yogurt choices, blankly gaping at J-Lo's cellulite on the celebrity gossip rack, or waiting impatiently at the red light as you push your double stroller 8 inches in front of our bumpers. The waiting room music is always the same, the music with which we are by now all too familiar. Yes, it's that almost discounted ring, emanating beneath the cords of every pamphlet on the rack and every definitive source on the shelf, flapping the wings of the institutions that rebuild us. It's that persistent and tedious but relentless beat, the lists of symptoms and side effects, the short and to-the-point anecdotes, the 4/4 time of recovery and relapse, the persistent quarter notes of diagnostic charts. Grandiosity looms over the striving, self-elation impends the celebrant, finally putting to rest our anxieties about our dreams the only way we know how, by absolving the dream itself, by snubbing real music. And just like that, no more Thelonious Monk, no more of his insistent hands, no more of the nightmare of his play. Even if we can benefit from the often harsh regimen of vitamins thrust upon us, the question of whether the mesh surrounding the mentally ill protects the sufferers themselves has the most ambiguous answer. So when the afflicted are offered helping hands, the intentions of their purveyors are in constant need of scrutiny. Half the time, paranoid to begin with, a consumer might wonder if he can trust anyone at all. The jury is out, clutching reason like a privilege, and deemed unable to bear witness to ourselves. The case is dismissed, we hope, as we have no defense in the prisons to which we are destined. It's unfair, but it's much more than that. They can take everything. Now I want to know what's needed to live a long and prosperous life, a free life, a life from which I leave knowing the truth about myself, one where I don't die at the hand of a stranger, especially if that stranger is me. Okay.
Wonderful, thank
Okay,
you.
thanks, Max.
Thank you very much. I do have several questions, so I'll go ahead and get started. And the first one is addressed to you, Max. How old were you when you first noticed your symptoms, feelings, problems, behaviors, or things you questioned? Was it before the TV episode you asked your mom to watch?
It was not long before that. Really, it was my first. It was the first experience I can really recall that was anything like that. So at 19 years old, that was really my first experience of that kind.
Great, thank you. Also, Max, are there particular things that are effective helping you cope, obviously, beside your art and writing?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's all, what my mom and I call the XYZ, of living a sensible life, and I think dropping things out of my life like alcohol and making giving up the sleepless nights that I used to love. Those were elemental, and then of course my wife and my mom who are helping me with those things, and I think it's the network of people and the safety net that hopefully everyone can build around them. and help building, that really pulls you through too. You can't do it alone.
I would add that Max also pays attention to his diet, and he has really good support from his wife, Maria.
Great, thank you. Max, here is another question for you. Can you please enlighten me regarding saying sorry or making amends for things that happen during manic episodes? I'm very worried about my son's guilt and fear regarding the alienation of his friends. He is currently isolating himself from others who used to be his buddies.
Oh, well, that's such a nuanced and interesting question. I've never been asked that before. I think over time I've started to take more responsibility, but I think and I think eventually you sort of do have to take responsibility for the person that says and does the things that are sort of so out of whack and eventually become embarrassments. So there's a chapter in the book too about my first sort of return to college and how I sort of dealt with that awkwardness and the guilt, and it's hard, and it's one part of me wants to refuse to apologize because I really don't feel like that was me, or then somehow there's a double. I have some sort of double living inside me who I blame for everything I want to, but the other part of me wants to take responsibility, and that thinks that it's not that it's a way of sometimes meeting somebody halfway who may have been very disturbed by you or very offended or hurt by you. So so I wish I could give better advice about that, but I still go back and forth, and I think at this point I'm more quick to kind of apologize and be genuine about it, but there's still part of me that says I'm not responsible.
Great, thank you for that answer. The next question, was there any particular event that you can identify that triggered your first episode or subsequent manic episodes?
There wasn't anything that stressful about my first manic episode. I was pretty experimental with drugs, but I wasn't sort of as lost into drugs as many people get and do not become manic. So they could have, a little bit of experimentation in the summer could have played a part. Later on, I think the last episode that I had was probably spurred largely on by my father's death. I moved from Philadelphia, and my father died at the same time, so I sort of lost my friends and, my father. So I think on top of that, it was interfering, this move and this morning was interfering with my work, and, things fell apart from there. So sometimes life events, in fact, frequently, you have to be really careful when you're under stressful circumstances to be recognizing that. And sometimes those circumstances are really what get the better of you emotionally. So.
Great, thank you. The next question, Max, also, do you ever face an artist block? And if so, do you have ways to keep going?
Yeah, there definitely artist block all the time, but I think less and less. When I was first learning to be an artist, I think I felt like I was always an artist, had artist block. But I think the more you do it, the more you can do it, and somehow it's basically I can depend on, if I don't do it at all, if I don't spend at least 15, 20 minutes drawing every day, then I know that within a day or two, really, yeah, that artist block will be back right away. It seems to come right away when it has the opportunity. So gotta push it at bay with that 15 minutes a day.
Excellent, thank you. Um, are you comfortable addressing any medications that you're currently taking?
Yeah, it's just lithium right now. So, and that was a goal of mine and something I struggled to achieve. I was not, when I became sort of the wolf man, the active wolf man, um, it was a long time before my needs were met. I think before I knew my needs, but eventually, I really had to demand that was my what I was willing. I was really willing to take forever. It's enough to ask me to take one, difficult psychiatric drug. And um, I remember I saw a talk with Robert Whitaker, and he said, well, if the drug works, why does it also require a second and a third drug? And I don't know how I don't, necessarily espouse that, but it brought question into my mind. And I think when I finally did see Robert Whitaker speak, he wrote Anatomy of an Epidemic. I also read that book, and I think it just, even though he's an alarmist in the way he sort of strengthened certain, I guess, phobias and fears about medicine that I had. So I started to become very demanding that I had nothing but lithium in my medicine diet. But that being said, under other circumstances where things are much more turbulent, I might, there are medicines that I'm willing to take, but as a maintenance.
Yeah, I would just jump in and say, Max, when he has felt that things are really going off kilter, has been willing to add a medication, but probably just for, Max, a week or two or something, and then he goes back to his normal um, regimen.
Well, when you do that, the trick is that frequently that you have to stay on it for 6 months or so. So, it's never as easy as giving you something when you're feeling down. But as far as my experience with antidepressants has been very unresponsive, and the antipsychotics have had a lot of side effects with me, and a lot of I don't know, symptoms I can hardly really explain. So they're heavy drugs and they're mysterious. I think that's what scares me a lot, is that they're so mysterious.
Great.
But that's what I liked about them in the beginning.
Thank you for that answer. When you did start taking the lithium, how long did you feel that it took to actually start working for you?
Let's see. I'm not sure how I can't remember exactly how I ended up on it. I think it may have been one of those things where I wasn't on medicine and I was in the hospital, and then I left with lithium. So I'm not exactly certain, about that, but I think that the lithium prevented, there was sort of a half episode after I started taking it, and then until my father died, I was episode free, and that's when we wrote this book. So there was this sort of 6-year period where I was episode free. And let's see, in general, it was good at, it was a good drug for me, as an antidepressant as well. And so it sort of fit the bill for me. But I think it does take, it's sort of one of those, I don't know, 2 or 3 months or maybe 2 months or something of getting the full level of lithium in your body, because it's not just what you take at night, it's what you took the night before too. So
Great, thank you. Max, who is your favorite artist and why, and how did their art help your life?
How did it help my life? Well, I have a lot of, it's hard to name a favorite, but Martin Ramirez is one of my all-time favorite artists. I spent actually a lot of time copying his work. He's a outsider. He came to the States from Mexico and was shortly after institutionalized for schizophrenia, and he stayed in DeWitt Hospital for most of his life in California. So I think his work, I didn't know anything about his story, but I was just really blown away by his drawings. And so once I discovered the story, I was like kind of obsessed with him. He helped me because he was sort of my master. He became sort of my drawing master. I was, I guess, having one of those artist blocks. And I sort of took notes on Ramirez in every way possible. And so I benefited because he sort of helped me relearn to draw, and he sort of invigorated a different sort of set of reasons maybe for doing the drawing. And he had sort of maybe this way of becoming lost in a meditative state maybe when he was drawing. And so that was, it was important to me to start to think about art as a meditative device, and not necessarily a place always to express your travails and illnesses, but a place of refuge to escape to.
Great, thank you. Max, you said you have eliminated alcohol in your life. Have you also eliminated caffeine and or nicotine? And have you made any particular diet changes that have helped decrease medications or eliminate them?
I have to admit to being a total caffeine addict, and I smoke as well. I read that 60% of bipolars are tobacco users, which is pretty amazing. 70% of schizophrenics. So that's not going to keep me from quitting, but one day. And with the lithium and it's just so hard without the caffeine, I feel like. But I understand, at the same time, and doctors have given me different information about these things. Some have even suggested that I use caffeine when I sort of needed a little bit of that manic high. So, I don't know. I'm not suggesting caffeine is really going to be good for, I know it's discouraged, but God, it's so hard when you get in the mental hospital and they won't give you coffee or cigarettes. But no, alcohol was a big deal for me, though, because alcohol prevented me from taking my medicine frequently. When two beers, if you drink 2 beers and you take 1,200 milligrams of lithium and you're me, you feel sick the whole next day. So, it's too hard on you. It's not good for you either. It's really bad for you. Bad mix. But so alcohol really had to go because I would have a few drinks and I wouldn't take my medicine. I'm like, oh, no big deal, And maybe it was enough to like make me forget or not care as much. So sometimes alcohol I could pretty well identify as the biggest precipitating factor in some of my episodes.
Great, thank you. The next question, Max, and possibly Kathy, you can chime in. Our daughter's husband refuses to accept her mental illness. What is the single most important thing a spouse can do for their loved one who is diagnosed?
Would you repeat that question? You said a husband would not accept his daughter's illness? Is that what you said?
No, our daughter's husband refuses to accept her mental illness. So husband and wife.
Okay.
What is the single most important thing a spouse can do for a loved one who is diagnosed?
That's an interesting question because I just did a panel last night with a man whose wife has mental illness, and he, of course, has been walked with her every step of the way, and I think that people who cannot accept illness need to get educated. I always recommend that they get involved with NAMI, that this husband should take family to family and really get a clear picture of what's going on. I think too often people also blame the person they love, and it's nobody's fault, and that's really important to understand. And to be supportive rather than critical. That's easy to say, maybe hard to do for some people, but I think spouses I think also are in very difficult positions because, you want to have a partner in your life. You want to have a partner who's helping you raise children, and when that partner is having difficulty, that's really hard on the spouse. I have a friend, though, who was having a really hard time because her husband has bipolar disorder, and family to family just turned things around for them. They've been together and solid for 10 years since that she took that class.
Great. Anything to add, Max?
Yeah, if I had anything to add, I guess it would just be that and my mom knows this from experience that you kind of have to make sure to always be their friend foremost, and that you don't want to be put in opposition to your loved one, and because once you become the enemy, you don't have a hand to play anymore. So I think that as difficult as that is, I think always being the friend that is working with somebody to try to help them. I mean, so difficult though.
Great, thank you. This will be our one last question, and you have answered a portion of this, but maybe you can expand. How do you encourage a loved one to move forward with their life, to fix financial problems, finish school, etc., without triggering an episode?
Were you going to answer that, Mom?
Yeah, how do we encourage people to move forward after an episode? Is that what your question is?
Well, without triggering one, if you know that a person needs encouragement, they're in maybe a difficult financial situation, or they need to finish school, etc., and you want to be careful not to trigger an episode.
Right. It's difficult to walk that fine line between when somebody, because obviously after you have an episode, you're exhausted. You need to rest. You need to regroup. You need to be given permission to rest. But at the same time, I think just being encouraging the person you love to do what they feel that they need to do and want to do. For Max, it was sometimes really hard, and I remember he had just had an episode, and he was extremely, extremely, extremely depressed, and had a class scheduled in New York at the New York Studio School. It was a 6-week class. He was going to live in New York alone in an apartment, and I was frantic. But I could not I could not say, don't go. It was up to him, and he did go, but I went as well and stayed with him until he seemed like he was ready to really be independent and on his own. And boy, it was hard, and I have to tell you that I am constantly in awe of Max's determination and courage in doing those things.
Well, I think most of all, I think what I wanted when I came out of an episode was to sort of know that life was still there on the other side, and I think that was really important in keeping episodes from happening where it could be prevented. That I know that there's something for me in this life after this disease has taken hold, and that it's equal or greater than what I had, because there's so much danger too with the depression and everything that I think people have to know, that they can have their lives back. And for me, I had to know that I could be an artist, and I didn't have to, life wasn't going to stop for me, because if it did stop, then what did I have? Why am I going to take the medicine, or why am I going to change all these habits about my life and walk the straight and narrow, if it's for sort of a compromised life. So.
Yeah, that's well put.
Yes, very nice ending. I want to thank both of you so much for opening up and sharing your story. I know that it's been a very good thing for many of our listeners, and I also want to remind you that this has been recorded and will be archived on our website. So if you'd like to review, go back and listen once again, or share this with someone else. And if there's a question that I was not able to get to, if you'd like to send it directly to me at dbrown@ibpf.org, I'd be happy to share that with Kathy and Max and hopefully get an answer for you directly.
Before we close, let me just add that Max and I both have websites too, and you can contact us on our websites. There's a contact me button you can push, so just Google Max Maddox or Kathy Brandt and you'll find us.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, thank you once again, and everyone have a wonderful balance of your day.